And so now we're coming to the end of our presentation. We're now going to look at the fifth building block of intercultural difference between peoples, and it deals with power distance. And power distance is basically how a society deals with inequality between its members. And it deals with the distinctions between people in their access to power and their level of status. Again, you wouldn't think that this would be a big thing, but it is a major obstacle to understanding other people and being able to especially do business successfully. In high power distance countries, corporate structures are very authoritarian and power is centralized. And you're going to find this in Mexico, for example, where one defers to the boss, to the authority. And managers actually will hold on to power. And the employees and the subordinates do not take initiative, but they rather wait for explicit instructions from their boss. In a high power distance culture, rank is hard won, or it might be given to you based upon your family and the people that you know. But once you get there, that rank has a lot of privileges. And the relationship between managers and employees, or managers and subordinates, those relationships tend to be very formal. Within a corporate structure, decisions are always going to be made at the top, and employees will not be asked what they think. And of utmost importance, a subordinate will never openly disagree with or say no to his or her boss. Now that's in a high power distance culture such as China, Japan, or Mexico. However, in a country such as the United States, we have very low power. There's not a lot of distance between the boss and the employee. There's a more democratic management style. In fact, in many companies in this country, managers will share some power with their employees. And the way to be criticized here as a boss is to say that you're a micromanager. People simply don't like to be micromanaged. And so the decision-making tends to be more consultative, more democratic, and really this whole thing of rank has very few privileges compared, let's say, to Mexico or to China. And so the manager-subordinate relationships are much more informal. And in many companies, it's actually okay to disagree with or say no to your boss. Now, you wouldn't do it consistently, but you would feel more comfortable actually disagreeing with your boss because you're more like equals. So again, let's look at the United States. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, we are all the way to the left of the continuum. We have very low distance in terms of the power relationships between people based upon their status. Whereas in Spain, Japan, again, the Middle East, China, most of Asia and all of Latin America are very sensitive to formality and the distance between people based upon their perceived status and their perceived power within the corporation. Now we see this very interestingly in classrooms across the world. And this plays out in the Chinese classroom. A Chinese student would never disagree or challenge the professor, even if that professor was wrong. And the relationship between a Chinese professor and a Chinese student is always very, very formal. Now, in the U.S. American classroom, we know that students will often call their teachers by their first name. They might even be encouraged to do so. And they don't mind challenging their teachers when they feel it's correct to do so. Again, a much more democratic kind of environment. So that's what we mean by high or low power distance. Is it okay to disagree? Does status really matter? Does rank really matter? In many parts of the globe it does, but in the United States, not so much. So now, what have we learned? We've learned a lot of things this afternoon. We've learned about culture. We've learned about what culture is. We've learned about stereotyping and how dangerous that is. We understand that there are 3 different ways to interpret a behavior to avoid stereotyping people. And we have learned 5 essential building blocks of culture. Let's review some of the things that we've learned about the United States. In the United States, we know that we tend to be, as an overall culture, we're very monochronic, and we have a sense that time is money, and we manage our time. We also happen to be very individualistic. We value our personal freedoms and our choice. We're not so conscious of our responsibility to others or family first. Again, allowing for individual differences. We also tend to have a high internal locus of control. We believe that anything is possible. We prefer direct communication, and we will say to someone, please say what you mean, and yes does mean yes, nothing else. We're not very conscious of the concept of face, and so it's oblivious to us whenever we're interacting with someone of a different culture, and we have a very low power distance. We prefer for equality of interaction between other people. So now let's finish our time together by considering some cross-cultural lessons that have been given to us in a book entitled The Art of Crossing Cultures by Craig Stourty. And I think these are very important. It's important for us to understand whenever we interact with people who are different from us, from different home cultures, that most people behave rationally. But what is rational in one culture may not be so in another. Now, we should try to understand a behavior even if we don't like it. It's important to understand why people do what they do, even if we disagree with it. We also need to remember that not all behavior is tied to culture. It can be an individual preference or an idiosyncrasy that we are observing. And if we're not sure about something when we are interacting with someone who's from a different culture, all we have to do is be willing to ask for clarification when we don't understand something. And I think by now you understand how important it is never to assume sameness. And we need to be willing to listen and to suspend judgment as we get to understand and know other people. So, I believe that it's true that the greatest gift that we could give to another person is the gift of understanding and the gift of being understood. Thank you for your attention today, and hopefully you understand that as a result of what you've learned in this lecture, that you are now more interculturally savvy and sensitive to difference than many other people that you know, and as a result, you're going to be able to take what you know and to take these competencies and be much more competitive in the global market.